If you're a collector of Gundam like I am, you've probably seen all the box art that they put on for their boxes and their different Gundams. And I wanted to try and test my skills out and see if I can do that. Because at one point I was a freelance illustrator for some toy box arts. So maybe I can bring out those skills and make a fan art of Barbados in a similar fashion than that. So let's get into it and see what comes up with that. Now, originally I wanted to make this piece based off of Unicorn because Unicorn is probably one of my favorites, as well as Freedom and Barbados. And after starting a few of the line work or the sketching for this piece, I realized there is a lot more detail in Unicorn than I expected. So I'm like, I'm gonna hold off on doing the insane details because I just finished a very detailed piece and I'm jumping into a new detailed piece here. So I wanted to do something with Barbados. And seeing as its helmet has variations in sizes and different styles, I thought it would be cool to make a little mishmash of all the different parts of Barbados and see what I can come up with. Obviously, when I got into the finalized sketching, it took me a while because of the different parts, joints, and all the different mechanisms in Gundams. And that was kind of cool to actually see what I could come up with to make it look right as much as I can, because I used mostly the toys and the Gunpla that I have as reference to help me with this. And then I used other, references from the shows and so forth to help me figure out where this piece was going to be going. And that's kind of the key factor, is where is the reference? What type of reference was working on with this piece? And I think that was something that I really enjoyed with this piece, is using the references and trying to elaborate more on them, adding more of the spring pipes thing that was going on with them and seeing what could be happening to move this forward. Now, obviously, I did this on live stream via YouTube and Twitch, which you can check me out Monday through Fridays here during the summer, and the schedule may change here later on, but join the Discord to find out that later on. But I had a lot of questions on how do I figure out where everything goes and how everything is going to be set up, and that's usually basic geometry. A lot of robots are just basic geometry, and if you can draw a giant mech, you can draw a person. And that's kind of the way I think of it, because a lot of these are just basic shapes and trying to make them in the correct perspective as much as possible. Now, with that, there are a lot of complex shapes on this that make perspective a little harder, because one thing is in a different perspective than another. And that's kind of where you have to figure out where things are going. And pushing that even further with occlusion shading can help with pinpointing everything. Now, the next longest part, obviously, was me rendering out the metallics and the regular shadows in this piece, because that was very tough to try to figure out. Because unlike in other aspects of the industry, most of this is done by myself. In the industry, when it comes to toy marketing and so on, they usually have a 3D model of the mold that they want posed in a correct way. So most of the figuring out of the values that are going on with the shading are already figured out when you're going into the rendering stage. And that's kind of where I had the tough part, because I am trying to figure out this part. So with that, all this did was try to push me to trying to figure out what I could do without using 3D models to make these illustrations. Because a lot of the artists that work for Gundam as an artist to design their boxes don't use 3D models. So I wanted to figure out what they did to try pushing these images a little more so I could mimic them. So this is kind of me pushing my skills that I've learned in the past with some of my past freelance work, but also trying to mimic professionals that are in the industry that I'm in currently and try to get things moving in a better perspective. Because that is the way of being an artist, is you're always trying to improve your skills. So that's why this part took forever, I feel, is because I'm trying to figure out where the lighting is, and that's why you can see the reference of the lighting sphere that I have there in the corner to help me understand where the lighting is going and what exactly is happening with it, so that I'm not losing track of what the image is trying to portray. The sunlight is to the left of the machine, right of us, and trying to push that into an aspect that helps solidify the design of this character or this Gundam that I'm working on. Now, once I get done with these values that I'm working on for this piece, I'll be jumping into using what is known as gradient maps. Now, unfortunately, I'm not using Photoshop, I'm using Clip Studio Paint, and Photoshop has an easier way to use gradient maps, but with Clip Studio Paint, it still has it. It's just you have to copy the sections of the image that you need to use in order to make it so that you can viably use the gradient maps to help with making all the colors work and making all the colors seem accurate as much as possible. Now, I do add my own texture that I have to add a little bit more of a metallic flair to this piece. But as you can see now, I am working on trying to get the gradient maps to actually work the way I want them to. So I'm selecting the areas that they are, reverse selecting and deleting everything, and then going in from there and just doing that over and over and over until I get all the colors correct for this piece. And that's kind of the way to jumpstart the coloring for these professional grade images that I wanted to work on. And obviously you're going to go in afterwards and try to fix things up where you can, check out the references, make sure where everything's at and how things can move forward. Because obviously there's going to be some differences with the reflections of the metals and the reflections off of each metal and the bouncing and the lighting source and so much. And that's kind of the tricky part when it comes to metallic characters like this and the stuff that I've done in the past. It's really hard to work out, but in the end, I feel like this is one of the more well-deserved, appreciative pieces that I've worked on, because I think this is awesome and shows kind of where my skills are at currently, because I've challenged myself to make sure that I can do it at this level. And obviously I'm going in and fixing up the little nitpicks and the little areas that don't quite make sense and adding more gradients or shadows in some areas so that specific focal points can align with the features of this Gundam. But as we get into the final parts of this piece, I'm going to be showing how I obviously did some effects, but had some issues with the background. I get continually praised by my friends and family about how I do backgrounds and how things work out. I do not see it. I feel like I'm just making a mess or basic shapes and just not making anything make sense until I see it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's about where it needs to be. And then I throw it into what is going on here. As you can see, it made a huge jump and I thought I was going absolutely nowhere with this piece and seeing what was going on. And then adding some more effects and finishing up. So with this finalized piece, I hope you guys like it. Please leave a comment of what you guys think of what I should work on next or what you think of this piece. And obviously like and subscribe. And I will see you guys all again next time in my next video. So thank you so much and have a good day. Bye.